Welcome to Treble the Trouble with your hosts, crochet designers Faye, Helen, and Vicky.
Welcome to Treble the Trouble with myself, Faye, Helen, and Vicky. Good evening, ladies.
Hi. Good evening.
So, would you like to say who you are?
I'm Helen. I run Rainbow Valley, which originally was a website selling patterns, but sort of evolved into a yarn shop.
And I'm Vicky, and I'm a crochet designer.
And I'm Faye, and I run Unravel and Unwind, and I'm a crochet designer on the side. Welcome. Our first topic for our very first Treble the Trouble is all about yarn and the yarn journey. And I'm going to hand over to Vicky to start the conversation.
Yeah, so when we came up with this as our first topic, it's a brilliant topic because we all do have a yarn journey, but I think we all have a common starting point, which is value double knit acrylic. And I think it's such a great starting yarn, but then we follow a path from there that leads us all in different directions, and we all use and have our own favorites, but there's that common foundation.
Yes. I can't actually remember what I started on because it was a long time ago. Only a couple of years really. But when I'm teaching, I teach them with basic acrylic, double knit, and usually a 450mm hook, because new people tend to be quite tight with their tension. When they get a bit more tension, then we go to a 4mm.
I agree. I also started with value acrylic too. Stylecraft, to be specific. That was where my journey started. And that was handed down to me from my grandmother because Stylecraft Special was her favourite to work with all the time.
I was brought up on Mariner because they are a South Wales company. So that is what was easiest. That's not the right word, is it? That was what was most common in my area because it's a South Wales company.
But I think all of them, whichever brand you started with, one of the best things is that the colour range is huge.
Yes, even with some of the more expensive and better quality double knits that you get now, because some of the acrylic yarns now, they don't feel anything like they used to. They're much softer and squishier, and especially the baby yarns. The process they go through makes them a little bit more expensive, but it also makes them exceptionally soft.
No more 70s scratchy yarn.
No.
That's exactly what I was going to say. We grew up in hand knits from our grandmother, so all of our school jumpers were knitted or crocheted, and I have not very fond memories of everything itched all the time.
Yeah.
It's no, I can't remember that far back either.
we had machine knitted by my aunt, and myself and all my cousins. I can remember the Silver Jubilee. We all had red, white and blue jumpers. I had a poncho. The photographs are mortifying.
Would you like to share them with us?
Oh, I don't have them. They're in my mother's care.
That was a nice sidestep. Yeah, my mum used to do a lot of machine knitting as well. She used to get mill ends from a company up north. I can't remember what it's called. They used to come on combs, and they were like really, really thin. And you'd put 3 or 4 of them together to get your average weight for your knitting machine. We had loads of those, and you'd get some interesting combinations out with some of the colours she put together.
Yeah,
we did have to help her a bit because she was colourblind. So if she was doing a blue jumper, we had to say to her, that pile over there is blue, that pile over there is green, don't mix them.
So it sounds like we all have yarny backgrounds. We grew up with yarn and around yarn craft.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, my dad taught me at quite a young age. He also taught my mum when they got married and everything. My mum couldn't do any of this. It was my dad that taught her. And he's still into all stuff like that. They do tapping together and all sorts of stuff.
I learned all about yarn and knitting and crochet from my gran, who was actually vice president of the Knitting and Crochet Guild while I was growing up.
Wow.
So, yeah. Yes,
Crochet
my little
royalty.
claim to fame.
Definitely royalty.
So yeah, definitely a yarny background. So I know with my yarn journey, obviously I've mentioned Stylecraft Special DK, and I was using that for a long time. As a beginner, I was very frightened of using anything a little bit more fancy than Stylecraft, but about a couple of years into the journey, I discovered the hand-dyed yarns and real wools, and then realised I was actually becoming a bit of a yarn snob and not using the budget yarns anymore and wanting to use fibres that had wool content or silk or alpaca, and having the animal fibres, and more recently plant fibres, which have been really interesting to work with.
The thing is that the budget yarns have their place, especially when it comes to children. They grow out of stuff so fast, and it's machine washable.
Yeah.
The other thing I found was that if I used expensive yarn to make something for somebody else, they wouldn't want to pay me for it because it just costs so much to make it. So it was a case of using cheaper yarn if I was doing it for somebody else, but then I'd get a bit nice stuff.
Yeah.
I have experimented with various things. This actually is hemp.
Wow.
Oh, very nice.
And the more you wash it, the softer it gets.
That's
did
the
wash
one that
it.
I squished.
Yeah, I did wash it 3 or 4 times before I wore it because it did smell like potato sacks. So it took a few washes to get the smell out, but of course each wash made it softer, and it's really nice to wear.
Yeah, linen can be like that as well. The more you wash it, the linen yarns get softer.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah,
drapes
absolutely.
as well.
So now I've noticed that we've mentioned yarn and mentioned the word yarn and haven't actually referred to anything as wool. So the reason we use yarn is it's a generic word that will cover all the different types of threads and fibres that are out there. And ideally, you're only referring to something that's wool if it's actually an animal fibre. Is that right?
Pretty much at the moment. It used to be that anything over a certain thickness was wool and anything under a certain thickness was cotton, right? Even if it wasn't made from that.
Right.
It's since we've sort of got a little bit more Americanized that we've got to yarn and thread, because you get so many different types of yarns and you get so many different types of threads. And sometimes I get people coming in the shop and saying, I want a ball of wool. Do you actually mean wool or do you mean acrylic? Wool, how much do you want to spend?
Yeah.
And this is where you decide on what they want. So a UK thing is very much acrylic is still called wool with the older generation.
Yes.
Because that's what it was always called.
And they didn't have all this choice that we have now either.
No. You know, it was wool and cotton, whereas those two phrases have gone over to yarn and thread.
Yeah.
And now if somebody says wool, chances are they actually mean wool, but there is a chance that they mean acrylic.
Yeah.
You know, so but yes, there's lots of wool. So did you want to see my yarn bowl? Right. So when you get past the absolute beginning stage, where you're not frogging it every 2 minutes and you're not making as many mistakes.
Can I stop you there? Can you
Yes.
tell us what frogging is?
Frogging is where you undo your crochet,
Okay.
right? It's called frogging because you rip it.
Right.
I like that. I know a lot of people who have never come across the terminology frogging, but they do understand rip it out.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
the amount of people that I've told about that and they thought I was joking, but no, actually, it is an official crochet term.
Yeah.
It's like with knitting, they call it tinking.
Knitting backwards.
Yeah.
Crochet is easier to frog than knitting, though, that's for sure.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So this is my yarn bowl.
Ooh.
Right.
It's pretty.
It is very pretty. It's also very expensive, but it was a treat. It's handmade, and I will, you see.
Oh, it's got the rainbow.
Yeah. However, it was cheap for what it is because it's classed as a second.
Right.
And the only thing I can find wrong with it, I don't know whether you're going to be able to see it on there. There is a bubble just there.
No, I can't see that.
Wouldn't have known.
No, but it's beautiful. I love it. I used to go down to the London Glassworks every year, and I saw this for 4 years running. And the 4th year, it was still there, and I'd come into a little bit of money, so I thought it's got to be done.
Yes. So do you have acrylics in your yarn petting bowl?
No.
What?
I have my yarn petting bowl is for when I see really nice yarn that jumps into my shopping basket, right? And then I have to wait for it to tell me what it wants to be. And the other bit thing about it is that you put it somewhere where you walk past it all the time, so it will stroke bits as you go past, right? It just makes you feel good having all this gorgeous squishiness. This is where is it? It says on here somewhere. This is baby alpaca.
So that's super soft then.
And that is very soft.
Yeah.
I think this may end up being some sort of shawl or something for me, because those are sort of my colours that I really like. This is lace weight. It's not 100% wool. It says on here somewhere what it is. It's a high content wool, 75% wool. But that again is lace weight, and you don't need me to tell you why I bought this one.
No, that's completely new.
This one is silk.
Yeah.
This one is more like a thread, and I'm going to be doing crochet with it at some point and make some jewellery out of it.
I was just thinking earrings or something like that, because it's so fine.
This is something I've been playing with.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might see a theme in some of this here, because this is silk.
Yeah.
These are Malabrigo silk, and they're more of a sort of 4-ply weight.
Yep.
There's that one and that one. Oh, look, there's 3 of them, actually.
I like the yellow.
Again, because it's silk and it's more thread-like, I was thinking more in the way of the crocheting for these, because you don't want stretchy yarn for crochet, but that is a whole nother episode. This one is silk packer, which is a combination of silk and baby alpaca.
And what sort of weight is that one?
That's lace weight again, but that is yarn, not thread.
She's got so many.
I know.
There was 2 in here. There's this one, and there should be a goldy coloured one.
Like Mary Poppins handbag.
Yeah, so this one is left over from making a stole that was on the front cover of inside crochet 4 years ago, maybe longer than that. This is some that I bought at Fibre East, hand dyed.
Yeah.
4-ply Brit stock, 40% British Falkland, 20% British Wensleydale, 20% British alpaca, and 20% nylon, which means that is basically sock yarn.
Yeah.
Just because it's sock yarn does not mean you have to use it for socks.
Oh no, sock yarn makes the most beautiful shawls and cowls and hats and fingerless gloves. It's perfect.
It's the reason it's classed as sock yarn is because it's not 100% wool. It has nylon or some other artificial fibre in it that strengthens the wool.
Yeah.
If you make socks from pure wool, they will felt and go in holes.
Yeah.
So I noticed throughout that you've spoken about different weights of yarn. So you've mentioned lace weight, you've mentioned 4-ply. So what is the difference, and what do all these different weights mean?
Sticking to British weights here, there are American ones that sort of slot in between them. The most common weights used in the UK is 4-ply, double knit, Aran, and chunky. If you want to go fine and make something light and lacy, then you've got a lace weight.
This is a lace weight shawl.
Yeah, it's
Beautiful.
as you can see that it's fine, and whereas Faye is wearing double knit.
Oh,
No,
4-ply.
4-ply, right. This is actually 4-ply, but I've used it double because I did thread painting with it, and that's another technique, but you have to use the yarn double in it.
So if you use double yarn, if you have 2 strands of, let's say, 4-ply, what weight does that equate to then?
It's not exactly, but if you 2 strands of 4-ply make Aran,
Yeah.
2 strands of double knit make chunky.
Yeah.
You can't mix and match, so you can't use a ball of chunky and then 2 balls of double knit, because your weight is different. You have to stick to the same yarn in a project. But you can use, double knit has a lot more colour ranges, so if you want to go chunky but you want more colours, just use your ball of double knit double.
Yes.
And it gives you a wider choice. I don't think there's anything else that's really exciting in here.
So when you're teaching and you've got your beginners and they've made their first thing using double knit and they're really excited and ready to go on the next thing, do you steer them in a particular direction towards any yarns?
It depends on what they want to do. I steer them away from particular yarns because they're not good for beginners.
Okay.
Right, but I don't steer them towards a particular yarn.
So my first thought there was mohair.
Yeah, it's not just mohair. You've got just fluffy yarns in general. They're really, really difficult to frog because as you're making them, the fluffy fibres get tangled up and you can't frog them.
Yeah.
So that is not good for a beginner project. They will make mistakes. They will want to frog and it will end up in a bucket.
Yeah.
So the rule of thumb there is, if you're still a beginner, stick with yarns that can easily be ripped out if they need to.
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking cotton as well is quite difficult to work with if you're a beginner because it's so firm.
Yes, acrylic in general is a lot more forgiving because it's stretchy.
Yeah.
Whereas cotton you don't get any stretch. So if you've got a tight tension, you want a stretchier yarn because that will help you along.
Yeah,
I can attest to that because I do have very tight tension, And the lace back jumper designed by Cassie Ward, I've made it using Sheep Year's Mighty, which is a cotton and jute mix. There is no stretch to it. I had to go up a hook size just so that I could get it to fit. Yeah, because the jumper has no stretch to it.
You do have quite tight tension.
Yeah, I do have very tight tension.
Yeah, my tension's a lot looser. I can tighten it up if I need to, but all stuff like that comes with experience. You know, right. I can crochet 2 bits on the same hook and with the same yarn and make them look totally different.
Yeah. So you've got a student in your class, or you've got a couple of students in your class. They're using the same type of yarn for their first projects. They're using the same size hook for their beginner granny square, for example. One of them's really, really struggling to get their hook into their granny square, into their stitches. What do you tell those beginners?
They need to loosen up. I generally give them a bigger hook and I show them how to hold it. You need to hold it and you need to move your fingers as you go, because if you hold the yarn in a certain place as you're working it, it doesn't pull the stitches tight on the hook. It's difficult to show on here, but when I'm crocheting, my fingers do not stay still.
And you have to hold it so that the yarn can move through it exactly the right speed or tension. If you hold it too tightly, it won't come through enough. But if you hold it too loosely, then it's the other end of the scale.
Yeah, I know somebody who used to tell her students, undo your bra, right?
Oh.
And because they were more relaxed without their bra done up, they ended up crocheting looser.
Oh, I've never heard that one before.
I thought that was rather funny, but yes, it's a case of when you're working into a starting chain, a lot of beginners will keep the stitch that's on the hook in the neck. This is your head, this is your neck, and this is your shank. And then you've got this bit here is called your throat. So when you make your stitch, you have to make sure the yarn slides all the way up, because it's this bit here that gives you the correct tension. If they keep it on this narrower bit, you can't make the next stitch because you can't get the head.
Well, that's half the size, isn't it, really?
Yeah. We did actually have one class where we were in the middle of doing something and it had a lot of chains in it. My class was doing a crochet along and this particular block had lots of chains in it, and their blocks were cupping. Some weren't, some were. I made them put them all down, get some scrap yarn out, and I taught them to chain. Right from the very beginning, made them chain and showed them how I did it and where to hold it and slowed them right down. And they went away, and when they came back the following week with their squares, they were all nice and flat because their chains weren't too tight. And that is one of the first things that you do need to learn to do. But if you concentrate on that right at the beginning, they get bored.
Yeah, absolutely.
They want to see some fabric coming out. They want to see a result. And a chain that's very wonky and very untidy is a waste of time.
Yeah.
So we always start with a granny square. I do the first couple of rounds and then they carry on with that.
It's an actual thing, isn't it? It's not just a length of, although I have to say, when my children were little, all 3 of them have adored making mile upon mile of crochet chain. And they once played a game where they sat on the top bunk and used it as fishing line and played fishing.
Very creative.
Yeah.
Very creative.
So did you ever use that chain?
I don't even know where it is now.
Because there is something that's called twice crocheted.
Right.
Basically, you crochet all your scraps into a ball.
Yeah.
So you make a chain and just wind them all into balls. And when you've got a few balls, then you reuse it. It basically comes out about the thickness. Well, If you're using double knit, it comes out about the thickness of sort of chunky to super chunky.
So that's quite cool for a bedroom rug or something like that then.
Yeah. You've got the choice of weaving your ends in or leaving them hanging out. But if you're going to leave them hanging out, make sure that they are tied off firmly.
Yes.
Right. And make sure that you leave a decent length on it so that it doesn't unravel back in. Don't cut them too short. But yeah, I was going to make myself a jacket and leave all the ends out with twice crocheted stuff. And then you could wear it whichever way you wanted. You could either have all the ends hanging out all over the place, or you could put those on the inside and have it tidy.
Yeah, I like that idea.
So yeah, that was never did happen, but there you go.
Well, you know, all the plans in our heads, we'd need centuries to make all the ideas we have.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So for those that are beginners and not experienced crocheters like ourselves, where do you advise that they start?
Start with a granny square. It's repetitive. You're doing the same stitch all the time. And making a granny square is more about getting comfortable with the hook and the yarn than actually making a granny square.
Yeah, I'll attest to that. One of the things that I tell the people that have been on the beginners course is to go home and just continue to make their granny square as big as possible, because it helps them to, as you go further and further into it, your tension starts becoming more even.
Yes.
Yeah. I think as well, starting with a treble stitch, which wouldn't necessarily be the place you'd think you start with chain, then you go to a double crochet, then you go to treble. But if you master treble, that's it, you can do all of them.
Yeah. When I've done the granny square with them and they're happy with what they've got, I then give them a rainbow to do. I have a free pattern on the website, and the rainbow teaches you a whole load of other stuff. You don't realize how much it is teaching you. You don't tell them beforehand how much it's teaching them because it scares them off. You just say, we're making that next. When they've made their granny square and their rainbow and they're happy with their work, then they can make anything they want to, within reason.
I like that, within reason. Yeah, because some students do tend to want to run before they can walk, don't they?
Oh, yes. Yes, you have students that sort of turn up and say, I've seen this and I'd like to make it. You think, yeah, okay, in a year or so.
So I know that, Vicky, you made a couple of granny squares, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
But specifically for today's session.
I've made 3 granny squares using 3 different wool weights. I've made a 4-ply, a double knit and a chunky knit. And you can see the size difference. They're all made to exactly the same pattern, exactly the same number of stitches, but there's a vast difference in size. And it just gives you an idea of, if you are thinking about moving on to your next project, think about how much time you've got to invest. If you want it quick, if you want a scarf for the weekend, go with the chunky.
Yes,
absolutely. I mean, we already know that crochet is a lot faster than knitting.
Yes,
but yeah, yarn weights make a difference as well, don't they? So like, you don't want to make it's Monday and you don't want to make a lace weight shawl for Saturday, really, do you? Because you'll never have it done in time.
No, and I think when you're starting out as well, I think it's good to be able to complete something in a reasonable amount of time. You know, these days we've probably all got blankets on the go or something, a treasured project that is taking a long time. But we have the patience and we know it's going to take a long time. But when you're starting out, you want a new hat, you want a scarf, maybe some fingerless gloves, but you want little projects that you can quickly master them, feel satisfied, perhaps learn something new while you're doing it, and then move on to the next thing.
So basically what you're saying is you want this weight, not that weight.
Yes. Definitely.
And that is a huge difference between the 2 threads, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is super chunky, and this is lace weight.
Yeah.
I mean, these are two that I didn't cover earlier because the 4 that I mentioned are your standard ones.
Yes.
But these are, yeah. I mean, with this one, you're looking at anywhere between, depending on what you're making, anywhere from like a 2 mil to a 350.
Yeah.
Depending on your drape and other things. And this one, the hook's in the bottom of the bag. This one's a 10 mil.
Yes.
For this. So you are looking at an enormous difference in hook sizes as well. Hang on, let me get that.
I can see that already.
You know, you have to gauge. This is why I'm saying that for the students within reason. I would not give them something like this, you know, something like this for their first project.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't give them the other one for their first project either, actually, because a bigger hook can be as awkward as using a smaller one, you know, when you're new. It does take a little bit of practice when you're experienced to switch from one to the other. It feels strange. You're using a 150 mil hook and using thread one day, and then you go onto a 6 mil hook and chunky the next day, and it feels awkward in your hands.
Yes.
Yeah, I've experienced that one just this week, actually. as I am currently using Chunky Monkey from Sheep Years on one project, and the difference between that and just double knit is incredible. I went from using the Chunky Monkey in a 5.5 hook to working with a 3 hook on double knit because it was a stuffed toy.
Yes.
So there are occasions where you can drop your hook size for a particular weight of yarn depending on the project.
Yeah, you use the ball band as a guideline, but it's not written in stone.
So if somebody's got a project in front of them and it's calling for a double knit from, I don't know, maybe Bergère or Laughing Hen, or, you know, the more expensive yarns, and this pattern is calling for 8 balls of this expensive yarn, can someone just go, okay, I'll go and get the Stylecraft Special 100-gram balls because it says 100-gram balls, and that'll be all right if I just get the same amount?
In general, yes. But you do have to be aware that the better quality yarn will give you a longer lasting and better quality item. But if you're looking at, again, if you're looking at beginners or you're looking at somebody on a budget, then there's some really nice acrylic yarns out there. You feel them and you don't realise they're acrylic.
Yeah. But can that beginner just go on the weight of the yarn? So if it says 8 100-gram balls in that particular brand, they can then go and get 8 balls in a different brand?
No, it depends on what the yarn is. 100 grams of cotton doesn't have as much meterage on it as 100 grams of acrylic because the cotton is heavier, it's a denser yarn. So you do need to check the meterage as well as checking the weight.
And you need to do a tension square.
Yes.
As well, if you're not using, well, you should anyway, but especially if you're changing the yarn.
I say to them, it depends on what they're making. If they're making a blanket, tension squares aren't a big deal. If they're making a scarf, tension squares aren't a big deal. If you're making an item of clothing, you make a tension square.
Yes.
But I've had students that haven't made a tension square because it's not important and then come out with a garment that doesn't fit them. So yes, change your yarn, but do a tension square and check the meterage as well as the weight.
Yeah.
Generally, wool and acrylic will interchange relatively easy. It's cotton is the sticking point.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot denser than acrylic.
Talking of cottons, one thing I have noticed is across brands, what one brand says is double knit, another brand's double knit, can be thinner when it comes to cottons in particular. That's a bit of a
This
tricky
is something that is quite frustrating. Yeah, I sell Peyton's 100% cotton double knit, and it doesn't look a lot thicker than the DMC Natura, which is 4-ply.
I had a similar comparison. I've used the Peyton's cotton that you're retailing, but I've also used the Stylecraft, what do they call it? Classic cotton, which of course is also marketed as a double knit. But compared to that Peyton's cotton, the Classic is more of an Aran weight if you're using the Peyton's as the double knit guideline.
Yeah.
So
things with cotton, you generally tend to go a bit looser on it because it doesn't stretch.
Yeah.
I'll take your word for that.
It varies. It depends on what you're making, what effect you want, and you can't just say it says do that, so I'll do that, because there's so many things that are different to each person. I had somebody that was making a blanket or something or other, but they were motifs. She ended up undoing her first half a dozen motifs and remaking them, because by the time she'd finished, she'd loosened off and her later ones were bigger. So again, yes, this is all tension, which, yes, we are coming to another one, but it is important with the yarn as well, because it's important with choosing yarn.
So you need to know for yourself, do you crochet tightly? Do you crochet loosely? Do you almost always get the exact tension? And that varies between designers as well, doesn't it? So
yes,
you kind of need to know yourself, and then you need to take into account what you're making, whether you've substituted yarn or what kind of yarn you're using.
I don't make things from other designers very often. Basically, I don't have the time rather than any other reason.
Yeah.
But I've recently been making the Shepier's cowl, and I had to go down a size hook to get the same tension as the pattern. I think I had to go down a full size. I can't remember if it was half a size or a full size, but I had to go down.
Yeah.
Actually, yes, it was a full size, because I'm sure it said to use a 4 and a 450, and I'm using a 3. I'm using my orange one, which is a 3, isn't it? So yeah, you do have to do the tension square. I mean, the Shepier's cowl was very clever in that the first 5 rows were your tension square. Tension square does not have to be square.
No.
Right? It's a tension swatch.
Yes.
So in this particular case, this blanket starts from the center and works out. So you did your first 5 rows, which came out about so big, and you measured it across to see if it was the same. If it wasn't, you undid it and started again.
Yeah, that's clever.
So that's that. It's a lot easier than with some things. If you're working in rows, then you need to do a tension square that's in rows.
Yes.
But if you're working in the round, you generally say the first so many rows should be this big, and that's the equivalent of your tension square. It depends what the pattern is.
Yeah, and that will be a common answer. I think that will be a theme. Depends on the pattern.
It always depends on the pattern. Different designers write in different ways. They have different tensions. They have different favourites for their yarn. They have different hooks that they use, and all of these things make a difference to your tension.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we'd really appreciate if you put some comments below the video just to give us your feedback, any questions that you might have. Is there something that we may have missed or glossed over too quickly that you'd like to learn a little bit more about? Put those in the comment threads below. That would be great. And we will be back next month, and our Treble the Trouble will be with inspiration, I believe. the inspiration and design journey, I think. So something a little bit different from today's.
We do have a web page which we're setting up, and it will have future topics on there. There will be an email link on there. So if there's anything you'd particularly like to know about some of these topics that we're thinking of covering later on, you can drop us an email and ask your questions, and we will do our best to answer them. But we're not making any promises.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Helen and Vicky, for taking this journey with us. Although it was Helen's idea and Vicky came up with the name.
Yeah, we're all jointly responsible.
We are. Yeah. So
thank you. We'll see you on the third Thursday of next month.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. This video has been made possible thanks to Unravel and Unwind Patreon supporters. You too can become a patron for as little as £3.60 a month. To subscribe, visit www.patreon.com/Unravel and Unwind.